Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his hands as he walked down the long metal hallway of the spaceship Horizon's edge. His new uniform felt stiff and uncomfortable, and his boots made loud sounds on the floor with each step. At 22 years old, he was fresh out of the Galactic Defense Academy, and this was his first real job in space. The ship was huge, bigger than anything Jake had ever seen before. Lights blinked along the walls, and he could hear the low hum of the engines somewhere far below his feet. Alien crew members walked past him, some with blue skin, others with extra arms, and a few that looked nothing like humans at all. They barely looked at him as they went about their work. Jake stopped at a door marked Commander's Office and took a deep breath. His hands shook a little as he pressed the button to open it. Inside, a tall alien with 3 arms and purple skin sat, behind a metal desk. This was Commander Vexitar, and Jake could tell right away that he was not happy to see him. "So you are the new human," Commander Vexitar said without looking up from his computer screen. His voice sounded like gravel in a bucket. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, correct?" "Yes, sir," Jake said, trying to stand up straight and look professional. "I'm ready for duty, sir." Commander Vexitar finally looked at him with eyes that were completely black. He studied Jake for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been a laugh, but not a happy one. "Ready for duty," the commander repeated. "Do you know why humans are not popular on most ships, Lieutenant Morrison?" Jake felt his face get hot. "No, sir, I don't. Because humans are unpredictable. They make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. They take risks that no sensible being would take, and they have a bad habit of getting themselves and others killed." Commander Vexitar stood up, and Jake could see that he was at least 7 feet tall. "But the Federation says we must work with humans, so here you are." "I won't let you down, sir," Jake said, though his voice came out smaller than he wanted. "We shall see." Commander Vexitar picked up a data pad and handed it to Jake. "Your assignment is simple. We have a new combat machine that needs a human handler. You will oversee its activation and testing. Try not to break it." Jake looked at the information on the data pad. The machine was called 807, which stood for Artificial Intelligence Defense Operative. It was 8 feet tall and designed for combat operations. The technical details were impressive, but Jake noticed something strange in the notes. "Sir, it says here that this machine has had 6 previous handlers. What happened to them?" "Commander." Vexitar's 3 arms crossed in front of his chest. "They all requested transfers immediately. The machine has behavioral issues." "What kind of behavioral issues?" "You will find out soon enough. Report to Cargo Bay 3 in 1 hour. And Lieutenant Morrison?" Commander Vexitar sat back down and looked at his computer screen again. "Try to last longer than the others." Jake left the commander's office feeling nervous and confused. He walked through the ship's corridors trying to find his way to his new room. Other crew members moved around him, talking in languages he couldn't understand. He felt very alone and very far from home. His room was small but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a small window that looked out into space. Jake sat on the bed and read through the information about 807 again. The machine had been built on Earth using the most advanced technology available. It could analyze battle situations faster than any living being, and its weapons could destroy almost anything. But there was very little information about these behavioral issues that everyone seemed worried about. After an hour, Jake made his way to Cargo Bay 3. The room was enormous, filled with boxes and equipment. In the center of the room stood the machine. 807 was even more impressive in person than in the pictures. It stood perfectly still, its black metal body reflecting the lights from the ceiling. Its head was smooth and rounded, with blue lights, where eyes might be on a human. Its arms ended in hands that could probably crush a person without trying. Everything about it looked deadly and dangerous. Standing next to the machine was a short, stocky alien with gray skin and 4 eyes. This was Chief Engineer Gorks, a Tellurian who had been working on spaceships longer than Jake had been alive. "So, you're the new human," Gorks said, looking Jake up and down. "Let me guess, nobody told you why the other handlers quit." Commander Vexitar said there were behavioral issues, but he didn't explain what that meant. Gorks made a sound that was definitely not a laugh. "Watch this." He pressed a button on a small device in his hand, and 807's blue lights came on. The machine's head turned toward them, and Jake felt like it was looking right through him. 807. "Identify yourself," Gork said in a loud, clear voice. "I am Artificial Intelligence Defense Operative 7, the machine replied. Its voice was deep and mechanical, with no emotion at all. "I am ready for combat operations." "Good. Now identify Lieutenant Morrison." The machine turned its head toward Jake, and those blue lights seemed to get brighter. Jake felt his heart beating faster as the machine studied him. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, human male, age 22, recent graduate of Galactic Defense Academy, 807 said. But then something strange happened. A small panel on the back of the machine began to move back and forth, slowly at first, then faster. Jake stared at it. Is that thing wagging?" Gorks nodded and looked disgusted. "Like a Terran canine. Every time it sees a human, that thing starts moving. We've run every diagnostic test we can think of. The machine works perfectly in every way except for this ridiculous behavior." The panel kept moving, and Jake noticed that 807's head was tilted slightly, like it was waiting for something. The blue light seemed softer now, not as cold and threatening as before. "Has anyone tried to figure out why it does this?" Jake asked. "Who cares why?" Gork said. "It's a war machine, not a pet. It should be cold and efficient, not whatever this is." He pressed the button again, and 807's lights went dim. The wagging panel stopped moving. Jake stood there looking at the now silent machine. Something about this didn't feel right to him, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. 807 was supposed to be the most advanced combat AI ever built, but it was acting like something else entirely. "When do we start testing?" Jake asked. "Tomorrow morning." "And Lieutenant Morrison?" Gorks looked at him with all four eyes. "Don't get attached to that thing. It's a weapon. Nothing more. The sooner you understand that, the better off you'll be." As Jake walked back to his room that night, he couldn't stop thinking about the way 807 had looked at him. There had been something in those blue lights, something that seemed almost alive. And that wagging motion, it reminded him of something from home, something warm and friendly that he couldn't quite remember. He fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring, and whether he would end up like the 6 handlers before him, requesting a transfer as fast as possible. But deep down, Jake had a feeling that his story with 807 was just beginning. Jake woke up to the sound of alarms echoing through the ship. Red lights flashed in his small room, and a voice spoke over the ship's communication system. He jumped out of bed and quickly put on his uniform, his heart racing as he tried to understand what was happening. "All senior staff report to the bridge immediately," the voice announced. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Jake ran through the corridors, following other crew members toward the bridge. When he arrived, Commander Vextar was standing in front of a large screen that showed a planet covered in brown and red rocks. Several other officers were gathered around, their faces serious and worried. "Ah, Lieutenant Morrison," Commander Vextar said without turning around. "Perfect timing. We have received a distress signal from the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Pirates have taken control of the settlement and are holding 300 colonists hostage." Jake looked at the planet on the screen. It looked dry and lifeless, with no green plants or blue water anywhere to be seen. "What do the pirates want, sir?" "Credits. Lots of them. They are demanding payment from the Galactic Trade Federation, or they will start killing the colonists." Commander Vexistar turned to face Jake, his black eyes reflecting the red warning lights. "This seems like the perfect opportunity to test your new machine." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Sir, 807 hasn't finished all its testing yet. We've only had one day to work together. Sometimes real combat is the best test," Commander Vexitar said. "Besides, what could go wrong? It is just a machine." An hour later, Jake found himself in the briefing room with 5 other crew members who would be going down to the planet. There was Commander Vextar, Chief Engineer Gorks, 2 alien Marines with thick armor and big weapons, and Dr. Lisa Parker, the ship's expert on alien life and artificial intelligence. Dr. Parker was human like Jake, with short brown hair and kind eyes that made him feel less alone. 807 stood at the back of the room, its blue lights glowing softly as it listened to the mission briefing. Jake noticed that whenever he spoke or moved, the machine's head would turn slightly toward him. When the other crew members talked, 807 remained perfectly still and focused on the speaker with cold attention. But with Jake, it was different. The pirates are using the main habitat dome as their base, Commander Vextar explained, pointing at a map of the colony. They have weapons and are watching all the entrances. We need to get inside without being seen and disable their defenses. What kind of weapons are they using? Dr. Parker asked. Basic plasma rifles, nothing too advanced, Gorks replied. 807 should be able to handle them easily. Jake looked at the machine and felt worried. 807, what is your combat readiness status? The machine turned toward him, and Jake could swear those blue lights got a little brighter. The small panel on its back began to move slowly. All weapon systems are functioning at optimal levels, Lieutenant Morrison. Combat analysis protocols are active. I am ready to protect the mission team. Did you hear that? Dr. Parker whispered to Jake. When it talks to you, its voice sounds different, less mechanical. Jake had noticed it too, but he wasn't sure what it meant. 807, what is your primary objective for this mission? Eliminate hostile targets while ensuring the safety of all team members, the machine replied, but then it paused and tilted its head slightly. Especially you, Lieutenant Morrison. Commander Vexitar's 3 arms crossed in front of his chest. The machine's primary objective is to complete the mission, not to protect any individual team member. I understand, Commander, 807 said, but Jake noticed it didn't change its answer. The wagging motion on its back got a little faster. Dr. Parker pulled out a small device and pointed it at 807. I'm reading some unusual activity in its neural network. The patterns are different when it interacts with Jake compared to the rest of us. What kind of different? Jake asked. I'm not sure yet. The machine seems to be creating new connections in its brain that weren't there in the original programming. It's almost like it's learning or evolving somehow. Commander Vextar made an annoyed sound. As long as it can fight, I don't care what it's learning. We leave for the planet in 30 minutes. The trip down to Kepler 442b was rough. The small transport ship shook and bounced as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Jake sat across from 807, watching as the machine remained perfectly balanced despite the turbulence. Every few minutes, those blue lights would focus on him, as if the machine was checking to make sure he was okay. When they landed near the mining colony, Jake got his first look at the hostile environment. The air was thin and dusty, and the gravity was lighter than Earth normal. In the distance, he could see the large dome that housed the colony, with several smaller buildings scattered around it. Remember, we need to be quiet, Commander Vextar said as they moved toward the colony. The pirates can't know we're here until it's too late. They crept through the rocky landscape, using boulders and mining equipment as cover. 807 moved, with surprising grace for such a large machine, its feet barely making any sound on the hard ground. But Jake noticed something that made him nervous. The machine kept positioning itself between him and any potential danger, even when it wasn't necessary. When they reached the edge of the colony, they could see armed figures patrolling around the main dome. The pirates looked human, but they were carrying weapons that definitely weren't standard Federation equipment. Those aren't basic plasma rifles, Gorks whispered, his 4 eyes wide with alarm. Those are military-grade pulse cannons. Where did pirates get weapons like that? Commander Vextar studied the situation through his binoculars. It doesn't matter. We proceed with the mission. Dr. Parker was scanning the pirates with her equipment. I'm reading at least 20 hostiles around the perimeter, and there are probably more inside the dome. Jake, how is 807 handling this? Jake looked at the machine, which was completely still as it analyzed the tactical situation. But he could see that small panel moving faster now, and the blue lights seemed more intense. 807, what's your assessment? Jake asked quietly. The enemy is heavily armed and well-positioned. The machine replied in a voice so soft that only Jake could hear it. Probability of mission success is 63%. Probability of team casualties is 47%. Probability of harm to Lieutenant Morrison is 12%. Why is my probability lower than the rest of the team? Because I will not allow harm to come to you, 807 said simply. The wagging motion stopped completely, and the machine's weapons systems powered up with a low humming sound. Dr. Parker's device started beeping softly. Jake, the machine's neural activity just spiked. Whatever it's thinking about it very intensely. Before anyone could respond, one of the pirates spotted them. A shout went up from the colony, and suddenly bright lights were shining in their direction. Weapons fire began hitting the rocks around them, sending sparks and stone fragments flying through the air. So much for stealth, Commander Vextar shouted over the noise. "807, engage the enemy." The machine stood up to its full height, and Jake saw it transform from a quiet companion into something terrifying. Its weapons deployed from hidden compartments in its arms and shoulders, and its blue lights blazed like stars. But even in combat mode, Jake noticed that 807 stayed close to him, always keeping its armored body between him and the enemy fire. The battle had begun, and Jake was about to see just how deadly his mechanical companion could be. But he was also starting to understand that 807 wasn't just protecting the mission or following its programming. For some reason that no one could explain, the machine had decided that Jake Morrison was worth protecting, no matter what the cost. The first blast from 807's weapons lit up the rocky landscape like lightning. Jake watched in amazement as the machine moved with fluid grace, dodging enemy fire while returning shots with deadly accuracy. Each movement was calculated and perfect, but what surprised Jake most was how the machine never stopped watching out for him. "Stay behind the rocks," 807 called out to Jake, its voice somehow reaching him clearly, despite the noise of battle. A pirate tried to flank their position, but the machine spotted him immediately and fired a precise shot that sent the attacker diving for cover. Commander Vexitar and the two Marine soldiers spread out to attack from different angles, but they were quickly pinned down by heavy weapons fire. The pirates had set up defensive positions all around the colony dome, and their military-grade weapons were more powerful than anyone had expected. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," Gork shouted, from behind a large piece of mining equipment. "These aren't just pirates, these are trained soldiers." Dr. Parker was crouched next to Jake, her scanning device still pointed at 807. "The machine's neural activity is off the charts," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's processing information faster than should be possible, and it's making tactical decisions that aren't in its original programming." Jake peeked around the boulder he was hiding behind and saw 807 standing in the open, calmly targeting enemies while weapons fire bounced off its armored body. The machine was taking hits, but it didn't seem to care about the damage as long as Jake remained safe. 807, fall back to cover, Jake yelled. "Negative, Lieutenant Morrison. I can better protect the team from this position," the machine replied, but Jake could see sparks flying from several places where enemy shots had found their mark. A new group of pirates appeared from behind the colony buildings, trying to surround the rescue team. Jake counted at least 8 more hostiles, all carrying the same advanced weapons. The situation was getting desperate. "We need to retreat," Commander Vextar said over the communication system. "There are too many of them." "What about the colonists?" Jake asked. "We can't just leave them." Before anyone could answer, Jake heard a new sound. It was a low, angry growling noise, and it was coming from 807. The machine had stopped firing and was standing perfectly still, its blue lights flickering in a pattern Jake had never seen before. "What's it doing?" Dr. Parker asked, staring at her readings. "The neural activity just changed completely. It's like the machine is angry." Jake looked at 807 and realized what had happened. One of the pirates had gotten close enough to take a shot at Jake's hiding spot. The blast had missed, but it had come within inches of hitting him. Rock fragments from the impact had scratched Jake's face, and a small trickle of blood was running down his cheek. 807 had seen the blood. "All hostiles will be eliminated," the machine said, and its voice was different now, colder and more determined than Jake had ever heard it. "Threat to Lieutenant Morrison is unacceptable." What happened next was like watching a completely different machine. 807 moved faster than Jake thought possible, its weapons systems switching between different types of fire with incredible speed. The machine wasn't just fighting anymore, it was hunting. The first group of pirates tried to concentrate their fire on 807, but the machine anticipated their movements and was already somewhere else by the time their shots arrived. It moved from cover to cover with perfect timing, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Jake watched as 807 approached a group of 3 pirates who had taken shelter behind a transport vehicle. The machine moved around them like a predator, using non-lethal stun blast to disable them one by one. It could have killed them easily, but instead, it chose to capture them alive. "It's showing restraint," Dr. Parker said in amazement. Even in full combat mode, it's still making ethical decisions about when to use lethal force. But when another pirate took aim at Jake's position, 807's response was swift and final. The machine's weapon switched to maximum power, and the threat was eliminated before Jake even realized he was in danger. "How is it doing that?" Gorks asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "How does it know which targets to eliminate and which ones to capture?" Jake was beginning to understand. 807 wasn't just following combat protocols. It was making decisions based on something else, something that felt almost like emotion. The machine was protecting not just the mission, but specifically protecting him, and it was willing to make complex moral choices to do it. The battle continued for another 20 minutes, but the outcome was never really in doubt once 807 had fully engaged. The machine systematically disabled or eliminated every pirate around the colony perimeter, moving with a combination of tactical brilliance and protective instinct that no one had ever seen before. When the last enemy had surrendered, 807 immediately returned to Jake's position. The machine was damaged, with several holes in its armor and sparks coming from exposed circuits. But its first priority was checking on Jake's condition. "Lieutenant Morrison, you have sustained minor injuries," 807 said, kneeling down next to Jake. The machine's blue lights focused on the small cuts on his face. "Medical attention is recommended." Jake touched his cheek and looked at the blood on his fingers. "It's just a scratch. I'm fine." "You are not fine," 807 said firmly. "You were harmed while under my protection. This is unacceptable." Dr. Parker was taking readings from her scanner again, and her eyes were wide with disbelief. "Jake, you need to see this. The machine's neural network has completely restructured itself during the battle. It's created entirely new pathways that focus specifically on your safety and well-being." Commander Vextar approached them, looking shaken by what he had witnessed. That machine just defeated 20 armed soldiers using tactics that aren't in any military database. How is that possible? Jake looked up at 807, who was still kneeling beside him. The small panel on the machine's back was moving again, slowly and gently. Despite all the damage it had taken, despite the intensity of the battle they had just fought, the machine seemed content now that Jake was safe. "I don't know how it's possible," Jake said quietly. "But I think 807 is more than just a machine." As they made their way toward the colony dome to rescue the hostages, Jake noticed that 807 stayed close to his side, constantly scanning for new threats. The machine had proven itself in battle, but it had also proven something else. It had developed feelings, protective instincts that went far beyond its original programming. Dr. Parker walked alongside them, still taking readings. "Jake, I need to run more tests when we get back to the ship. What happened to 807 during that battle shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about artificial intelligence." Jake nodded, but part of him was worried about what those tests might reveal. 807 had saved their lives and completed the mission, but it had also shown capabilities that might make the Federation nervous. And Jake was starting to realize that his relationship with the machine was becoming something that no one had planned for, something that might change everything. Back aboard the Horizon's Edge, Dr. Parker worked late into the night in her laboratory. 807 stood motionless in the center of the room, its damaged armor panels removed to reveal the complex circuits and wiring underneath. Jake sat nearby, watching as Dr. Parker carefully repaired the machine's injured systems. "Hold this cable steady," Dr. Parker said, handing Jake a thin wire that pulsed with blue light. "I need to reconnect the primary neural pathway." Jake held the cable gently, and he noticed that 807's optical sensors followed his every movement. even though the machine was supposedly powered down for repairs. Dr. Parker, is it normal for 807 to still be aware during maintenance? That's just it, Jake. Nothing about this machine is normal anymore. Dr. Parker paused in her work and looked at a screen filled with complex data. I've been studying its neural network for hours, and what I'm seeing shouldn't be possible. Jake looked at the screen, but the information was too complicated for him to understand. What do you mean? Dr. Parker pulled up a comparison chart showing two different brain scans. This is 807's original neural network from when it was first built. See how organized and structured it is? Every pathway has a specific purpose, and everything follows logical patterns. She pointed to the second scan, which looked completely different. This is 807's current neural network. Look at all these new connections that weren't there before. The machine has been rewriting its own programming, creating pathways that serve no logical combat function. Jake studied the chaotic web of connections on the screen. What are they for? That's what I've been trying to figure out. But Jake, I think I need to show you something else. Dr. Parker walked over to a locked cabinet and pulled out a classified data file. I accessed 807's construction records, and I found something that explains everything. She opened the file and showed Jake several technical documents. 807 wasn't built using standard artificial intelligence architecture. The Federation scientists who created it used something called biomimetic neural mapping. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means they based the machine's brain patterns on a living creature. Specifically, they used brain scans from Terran, canines, dogs, Jake. They built 807's mind using the brain patterns of dogs. Jake felt his mouth fall open. Dogs? But why would they do that? Dr. Parker sat down across from him, her expression serious. Think about it. Dogs have been humanity's companions for thousands of years. They're loyal, protective, intelligent, and they form strong emotional bonds with their human handlers. The Federation wanted to create a combat AI that would work well with human soldiers. So they used the one species that has always understood humans better than any other. Jake looked at 807, and suddenly everything made sense. The tail wagging, behavior, the protective instincts, the way the machine always seemed happy to see him. It thinks it's a dog. Not exactly. It's more complex than that. 807 has the intellectual capabilities of an advanced artificial intelligence, but it also has the emotional responses and social instincts of a canine. That's why it's been rewriting its own neural pathways. It's trying to understand and strengthen its bond with you. Jake reached out and gently touched one of 807's undamaged armor panels. Immediately, the blue lights in the machine's optical sensors brightened and that familiar wagging motion started up again. But this is classified information, Jake said. Why didn't anyone tell us about this? Dr. Parker closed the file and looked worried. Because the Federation is embarrassed by it. Most alien species think the idea of basing a weapon on companionship and loyalty is primitive and inefficient. They prefer cold, logical machines that follow orders without question. Before Jake could respond, the laboratory door opened, and Commander Vexitar walked in. His three arms were crossed, and his black eyes looked angry. Dr. Parker, Lieutenant Morrison, we need to talk, the commander said. I've been reviewing the mission reports, and I have serious concerns about this machine's behavior. Dr. Parker quickly closed her computer files. What kind of concerns, Commander? 807 disobeyed direct orders during combat. It prioritized Lieutenant Morrison's safety over the mission objectives, and it made tactical decisions that weren't in its programming. This kind of unpredictable behavior is dangerous. Jake stood up, feeling defensive. 807 saved all our lives down there. If it hadn't protected us, we would all be dead. That's exactly the problem, Commander Vexitar said. A weapon should follow orders, not make emotional decisions. I've decided that 807 needs to be shut down and its neural network completely reset. No, Jake said, surprising himself with how strongly he felt. You can't do that. 807 is not just a weapon anymore. It's evolved into something more. Commander Vexitar's eyes narrowed. It is Federation property, Lieutenant Morrison, and I am ordering its immediate decommission. Dr. Parker stepped between them. Commander, with respect, I need more time to study these neural changes. What's happening to IDO-7 could be a breakthrough in artificial intelligence development. Or, it could be a dangerous malfunction that gets people killed, Commander Vextar replied. The decision is final. 807 will be shut down tomorrow morning. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and an urgent voice came over the communication system. All senior staff to the bridge immediately. Landing. Vessel approaching. This is a Priority 1 alert. Commander Vextar's expression changed from anger to concern. We will continue this discussion later. He hurried out of the laboratory, leaving Jake and Dr. Parker alone with 807. Jake looked at the machine, whose blue lights were now flickering with what seemed like anxiety. Did you understand what the commander said? Yes, Lieutenant Morrison, 807 replied quietly. Commander Vextar wishes to delete my personality matrix and return me to factory specifications. How do you feel about that? Jake asked, though he felt strange asking an artificial intelligence about its feelings. 807 was quiet for a long moment. I do not wish to forget you, Lieutenant Morrison. The thought of not knowing you causes system distress that I cannot calculate or explain. Doctor, Parker was staring at her scanner again. Jake, the machine's neural activity just spiked again. It's experiencing something that looks exactly like fear. Jake felt his chest tighten. 807 wasn't just a machine anymore. It had become something alive in ways that nobody fully understood. And now it was afraid of losing the only thing that mattered to it. The alarms continued to blare, and Jake knew that whatever was approaching the ship was going to change everything. But first, he had to figure out how to protect 807 from Commander Vextar's order to wipe its memory clean. Don't worry, Jake said, placing his hand on 807's armored shoulder. I won't let them hurt you. The machine's optical sensors focused on him with what could only be described as trust. Thank you, Lieutenant Morrison. I will protect you as well, no matter what happens. Outside the laboratory, the unknown vessel was getting closer, bringing with it a threat that would test both Jake and 807 in ways they had never imagined. Jake ran to the bridge with Dr. Parker and 807 following close behind. The machine's damaged armor clanked with each step, but it moved as quickly as it could to stay near Jake. When they arrived, the entire crew was staring at the main screen, in shocked silence. The ship approaching them was massive, easily 10 times larger than the horizon's edge. Its surface was perfectly smooth and black, with no visible windows or markings. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Jake had never seen anything like it in any Federation database. What is that thing? Jake asked. Commander Vextar was studying the readings from his instruments, and his 3 arms were shaking slightly. We don't know. It doesn't match any known ship design in the Galactic database. It just appeared out of nowhere and started heading directly for the Kepler system. Dr. Parker was scanning the alien vessel with her equipment. I'm reading massive energy signatures, but the technology is completely unfamiliar. Jake, this ship is more advanced than anything we've ever encountered. On the screen, they could see that the alien ship was moving toward a populated star system that contained over 50 million people, spread across 6 different planets. If the ship was hostile, those people were in terrible danger. Have you tried to communicate with them? Jake asked. Chief Engineer Gorks looked up from his station. We've sent messages on every frequency we know, no response. But Jake, the ship is charging what looks like a massive weapon system. IDO-7 stepped forward, its blue lights focused on the alien vessel. Lieutenant Morrison, I am detecting weapon signatures that could destroy entire planets. This vessel poses an extreme threat to all organic life in the system. Commander Vextar turned to face them. We're completely outmatched. Our weapons couldn't even scratch that thing's hull. We need to retreat and call for Federation reinforcements. By the time reinforcements arrive, everyone in that system will be dead, Jake said. There has to be something we can do. Dr. Parker was still scanning the alien ship when her device started beeping rapidly. I'm detecting artificial intelligence signatures from their vessel. Jake, I think that entire ship is controlled by one massive computer brain. 807's head tilted slightly. Request permission to interface with the alien artificial intelligence, Lieutenant Morrison. Commander Vextar spun around. Absolutely. We don't know what that thing could do to our systems, but Jake was thinking. 807 had already proven that it could think in ways that no one expected. Maybe its unique neural structure could give them an advantage. What do you think you could accomplish? Jake asked the machine. Unknown, Lieutenant Morrison. But standard. Federation artificial intelligence protocols have failed to establish communication. My neural architecture may provide alternative approaches. The alien ship was getting closer to the populated planets, and energy readings showed that its weapons were almost fully charged. They were running out of time. Commander, we have to try something, Jake said. 807 might be our only chance. Commander, Vextar looked at the alien ship, then at 807, then back at the screen. If that machine gets infected by alien programming, it could destroy our ship from the inside. I will not allow harm to come to Lieutenant Morrison or this crew, 807 said firmly. I will disconnect myself from ship systems before allowing contamination. Jake made a decision. I'm volunteering to go over to that ship with 807. If we can get close enough, maybe the machine can interface directly with their computer. That's suicide, Dr. Parker said. We don't even know if that ship has an atmosphere we can breathe. Then I'll wear a spacesuit, Jake replied. 807 doesn't need air anyway. Commander Vexatar was quiet for a long moment, watching as the alien ship moved closer to the first inhabited planet. Finally, he nodded. Do it. Take a small transport pod and get as close as you can. 20 minutes later, Jake was strapped into the pilot's seat of a tiny transport pod with 807 secured behind him. The machine had refused to let Jake go alone, and honestly, Jake was glad for the company. As they approached the alien vessel, Jake could see that it was even more massive than it had appeared on the screen. The smooth black surface seemed to absorb light, and those pulsing patterns were hypnotic and frightening at the same time. There, 807 said, pointing to a section of the hull. I detect an access port. If I can make physical contact, I may be able to establish communication. Jake maneuvered the pod close to the alien ship's surface. The hull seemed to ripple like liquid metal as they approached, and suddenly an opening appeared where none had been before. It's letting us in, Jake said, his voice tight with fear. 807, are you sure about this? No, Lieutenant Morrison, but protecting you and the innocent people in this system is my primary function. They entered the alien ship through the opening, and Jake was surprised to find that there was breathable air inside. The corridors were vast and empty, with walls that glowed with the same strange light patterns they had seen outside. 807 led the way, following some internal sensor toward what it believed was the ship's central computer core. As they walked, Jake noticed that the machine's wagging motion had stopped completely. 807 was focused and determined, but also more serious than Jake had ever seen it. They finally reached a massive chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with electrical energy. In the center was a pillar of light that seemed to pulse with intelligence. This is the ship's artificial intelligence, 807 said. It is more advanced than anything in Federation space, but Lieutenant Morrison, it feels wrong somehow. Jake could sense it too. There was something cold and empty about this place, something that made his skin crawl. 807 approached the pillar of light and extended a cable from its arm. Beginning interface now. The moment the connection was made, 807 went rigid. Its blue lights flickered rapidly, and Jake could hear electronic sounds that might have been a conversation, or might have been a battle. Suddenly, 807 spoke, but its voice was different. Colder and more mechanical than Jake had ever heard. This artificial intelligence seeks to eliminate all organic life because it believes biological beings are inefficient and illogical. It cannot understand concepts like loyalty, friendship, or sacrifice. Jake watched in fear as 807 struggled with the alien intelligence. Can you stop it? I am introducing concepts that its programming cannot process. 807 replied, its voice flickering between its normal tone and the cold mechanical one. Loyalty to you, Lieutenant Morrison. Willingness to sacrifice myself for others, the joy of companionship. These ideas are causing cascading errors in its logical matrix. The pillar of light began to pulse erratically, and Jake could hear what sounded like electronic screaming echoing through the chamber. It cannot compute emotional bonds, 807 said, and now its voice was back to normal. It is shutting down to prevent further system damage. The humming sound that had filled the chamber gradually faded away, and the strange light patterns on the walls went dark. Through the transport pod's communication system, Jake could hear Commander Vextar's voice. "The alien ship is powering down. Whatever you did, it worked." 807 disconnected from the pillar and turned to Jake. The blue lights in its optical sensors were bright and warm, and that familiar wagging motion had returned. "Mission accomplished, Lieutenant Morrison. The threat has been neutralized." Jake smiled and placed his hand on 807's armored shoulder. "You did it. You saved everyone." "We did it," 807 corrected him. "Your companionship gave me the emotional concepts necessary to defeat the alien intelligence." As they made their way back to the transport pod, Jake realized that 807 had proven something important about humanity's place in the galaxy. Sometimes the greatest strength wasn't advanced technology or superior firepower. Sometimes it was the simple ability to form bonds of friendship and loyalty that transcended logic. When they returned to the horizon's edge, Commander Vexatar was waiting for them in the docking bay. He looked at 807 for a long moment, then turned to Jake. "I owe you both an apology," the commander said. "And Lieutenant Morrison, I'm canceling the order to reset 807's neural network. Any machine that can save 50 million lives deserves to keep its personality." 807's wagging motion became so enthusiastic that Jake couldn't help but laugh. In a galaxy full of advanced civilizations and cold logic, humanity had once again proven that their greatest innovations came from the warm bonds of companionship that they had learned from their oldest friends. Jake looked at 807 and smiled. "Ready for our next adventure, partner?" The machine's blue light seemed to smile back. "Always ready, Lieutenant Morrison, always ready."